N5JH. I know I've probably talked to a lot of you at one time or another, but what I'm going to do is present a presentation on D-Star. And the goal of this presentation was really to try not to overwhelm you with a lot of technical information, but give you enough information to where you could take a D-Star radio out of the box and be able to get on the air in a very short time on D-Star. I've got 7 short videos at the end where I show you basically how to set up the radio, and it incorporates all the concepts that we talked about as we go through this presentation. So the agenda is we'll do a little bit on D-Star basics. I'll talk about D-Star registration, and there is some new information on D-Star registration, which is going to make it really easy to do. We'll show a few of the D-Star current radios. And then probably the most important thing that you can understand out of this presentation is the call sign register and how to navigate through D-Star. So we're going to show you some things on some slides, and then we'll actually put those into practice when we look at the videos. And the videos are next. I've got 7 short videos. And then I'll talk about, the local D-Star repeaters, and then give you a bunch of resources. And if I'm not mistaken, Dave, we're going to take this presentation and put it up so it'll be there in perpetuity, I hope. And that's why I did the videos, so that you could actually go to the videos if you got a radio and actually see how to do this.
That's correct, Bob. It is already being recorded.
Thank you, David. Okay, a few facts about D-Star. D-Star.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. All right. Yep, I see you, Greg. Okay, D-Star stands for Digital Smart Technologies for Amateur Radio. And it was a protocol that was established by the Japanese Amateur Radio League, which is basically a combination of the ARRL and the FCC rolled into one. And that was in 2001. D-Star is an open specification. A lot of people think it's proprietary to ICOM, but it really isn't. The only thing that's proprietary in the radio is the vocoder, which is a $20 part. But ICOM was a primary promoter of the new technology. And so you'll see that they have a very big presence in D-Star. D-Star operates on 2 meters, 440, 1.2 gigahertz, although there's probably not a lot of those radios around. And also on HF, if you have certain kinds of radios. The digital data, your voice is changed into ones and zeros, and it's transported at 4,800 bits per second. 2,400 bits of those are for voice. 1,200 bits is for something called a forward error correction. And then 1,200 bits are for data. So you can actually merge data with your voice on D-Star. The 1.2 gigahertz digital data actually allows you to transmit information almost at internet speeds, 128 kilobaud. So if you've got that, I'm not sure who you can talk to because there's not a lot of those radios around yet. But I suspect more will be coming because of the use of 1.2 gigahertz in emergency communications. Let's see, there is DPRS, which is digital APRS. You can actually track yourself on APRS.5 with this. I don't have a video to show this because the presentation's already pretty long, but you can do that. And maybe later on we can do a part 2. But it won't be for a while, David, so don't squeeze me in too soon. One of the interesting things is there's no squelch tail. So if you're familiar with a squelch tail on FM, you're not going to hear it on D-Star. There is no courtesy tone, and a PL tone is not required. Okay, so what can it do? First of all, you can link. Linking is kind of the heart of D-Star. You can link to something called reflectors, and the reflector acts as a conference bridge for linking multiple repeaters together. And then you can actually link to another repeater. And the beauty of this is that anybody can do the linking. You don't need any special codes. You don't need any DTMF tones, and so you can link to your heart's content. Let's see, it allows for more channels in a crowded spectrum. The FCC emission designator for standard FM is 16 kilohertz. And the FCC emission designator for D-Star is 6.25 kilohertz. So you can actually put more repeaters in a crowded spectrum. And what does it allow? It allows older hams or people that have very strict antenna restrictions to be able to talk to hams all the way around the world with just a handheld. And it allows newer hams with technician license to easily communicate with hams all over the world. It does use the internet, okay? So if you're not a fan of the internet, or if you think amateur radio is only radios, then D-Star may not be for you. You can call another ham without knowing their current location or what D-Star repeater they last transmitted on. That's kind of a neat feature. I've got a video at the very end. If I have enough time, I'll show that because some people have asked me about that. But it's something that we should use very judiciously because there are some issues with that. Okay, moving along. The nice thing about digital radio is that the voice doesn't degrade as you get lower in signal strength. And if you listen to D-Star radio, and we do have a D-Star Simplex net on Wednesday evening, everybody is clear and there's no crackling, there's no fuzziness, none of that stuff until you get out so far and then you drop off at the end of the world. But it's a lot more forgiving than standard FM is. Stop me at any time if you have a question. Okay, D-Star operation. So what can you do with it? Well, you can do standard simplex. You can do ham to ham, which is fairly easy. You can do communications through a local repeater, just like you can with an FM repeater. But on the third part of this view graph, this is where you really can do some more interesting things. All these people that are probably connected together, every one of these people, depending on where they are, and they're in different places, can all talk to each other and they can all hear each other. And unlike Echolink, there's no delay, which is kind of a really neat thing. And that is because of the use of reflectors. So what is a D-Star reflector? Basically what it is, it's just a computer or a server that's connected to the internet that runs special software. It acts as a central conferencing hub so that everybody that is on a repeater that's connected to that reflector can all talk to each other and can all hear each other. Repeaters are linked to that reflector. And the key element that enables linking multiple D-Star repeaters together is that reflector. The reflector reflects digital voice and data back to all the link nodes. So when a reflector receives a transmission, what it does is it rebroadcasts it to all the other links that are connected to that reflector. And presently, there is a lot of reflectors. There is 91 reflectors. And the reflectors have an A, B, C, D, and E module.
3.5.
Okay, and you can consider those independent conference bridges. A, B, and C modules are used primarily for voice, although they can be used for data. And then the D module is used primarily for data. Any questions so far? Okay, you either understand, you've gone to sleep, or you don't care. That's okay. Here's some reflector operations. Reflector 025B is a reflector that's located in Washington, D.C. So the people in Germantown, Maryland, and the ones in Frederick, Maryland can sit there and talk to each other. Everybody that's on that repeater or on those repeaters can end up talking to each other. Reflector 001C or 1 Charlie is located in London and is known as the D-Star mega repeater. And if you get on reflector 1 Charlie or reflector 30 Charlie, you will hear people from all over the world. So the people in Baltimore, Alexandria, in London that are communicating through those repeaters and are linked to that reflector can all talk to each other. It is in London, so that you typically hear a lot of Brits that are on reflector 1 Charlie and also 30 Charlie. Reflector 068A or 68 Alpha is in Italy. It's an Italian reflector, and that's why you see people in Italy being able to talk to each other. Here's a partial list of the reflectors, and I put that up because if you can read this, reflector 55 Alpha, Beta, and Charlie and Delta are the New Mexico reflector. And the local repeaters here are always typically linked to reflector 55 Alpha.
Hey, Bob,
Yes.
question, this is Jerry, K6LIE.
Yeah, Jerry.
I assume that once you're into a reflector, you're automatically connected to any country or any city that is also connected to reflector. You don't have to put a code in to go to a particular city or anything like that. It's all, once you're into the reflector, you're worldwide, if that's where the reflector.
You're absolutely correct, Jerry. As soon as you connect to that reflector, anybody else that's connected to that reflector can hear you. And it doesn't matter where they are. They could be in London, they could be in Los Alamos. If they're connected to that reflector, you can all hear each other and talk to each other.
Like IRLP, same thing. When you're in a reflector, it's whoever's connected to the reflector.
Which is really a good thing, and there's no delay. And it sounds like they're sitting right next to you. I was driving home from the VA one day and listening, and I talked to a couple of youngsters that were in Johannesburg, South Africa, from the car, like they were sitting in the car with me. This is basically what a D-Star repeater looks like. This is W0DK, and the reason I showed this is because they have a complete stack. So at the very bottom, the B stack is UHF. And you have to remember to associate B with UHF. That's important, okay? The C repeater right above that is the VHF repeater, and it's module C, and that's always going to be true of any repeater. Module A incorporates 2 repeaters, one for digital voice and one for digital data. And the digital data, and this is 1.2 gigahertz, the digital data can go as fast as 128 kilobits per second. And then on the right side, you notice that the controller is connected to a gateway server, and the gateway server is connected to the internet. And every repeater that I know of that's a D-Star repeater has a gateway for you to be able to make those connections. Let me talk about the registration process, because that's been a big problem. A lot of people have a lot of trouble with registering on D-Star, but it's going to be simplified. You don't have to register to be able to operate on D-Star, okay? But if you don't register, you're limited to simplex and only going through your local repeater. Registering your call sign and getting registered on D-Star allows you access through the D-Star gateway system so that you can talk to anybody around the world. And once you're registered, the gateway will recognize your call sign. The gateway keeps track of that. It sends it to the US Trust server in Dallas, and it keeps track of which modules you last transmitted on. And that's how you can find somebody that you talk to that's maybe not in the local area. Okay, since you are registered, and you'll see this when we look at the videos, one of the neat things, or not neat things, depending on how you look at it, is that when you key the microphone, your call sign is going to show on the bottom of everybody's screen. So you cannot be an anonymous kerchunker. Okay, if you key the microphone and don't say anything, everybody's going to know that it's you. You can only register on one and only one system, and ideally a repeater close to you. And I would recommend that you start with K5URR. There's 3 local repeaters, and Ed James is the guy that administers all 3 of those repeaters. So it doesn't really matter which one you register, although W5URD up on Capilla Peak is very difficult to access, and they've had problems up there with issues in the repeaters. Yes, sir.
Just a quick note, we do have some people from outside of the Albuquerque Santa Fe area on the call. So your point about registering with the nearest repeater or a repeater near you is valid for those people that are not in Albuquerque.
Actually, Jerry, you could register on any repeater anywhere. They recommend that you do it locally. And, even if you're in Santa Fe or Los Alamos, you can still go to this particular link and register. And I would recommend that, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Because registering on these repeaters is different than registering anywhere else. Okay. Once you sign up for registration, and I'll show a couple of view graphs that show that, you wait for an acknowledgement. And when you get the acknowledgement, it's going to be in an email. And the email is going to tell you that your registration has been accepted and that the registration is complete. You don't have to go through the other steps that you'd have to go through if you registered anywhere else. And the reason for that is because Ed James, who administers these repeaters, has seen so many issues that he decided that he would go ahead and complete your registration for you. So you actually luck out on this. And I talked to Ed James a couple of days ago and got all this information straight from the horse's mouth. If Ed's listening, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to call you a horse, Ed. My apologies. You can check your registration at this link. And by the way, all the links in this presentation, I've checked them all and they're all valid. So when you go to registration and you go to that link where it says suggest starting at, you're going to go to this slide. And basically, all you have to do here is just click that register button. Okay. And then you'll be taken to this next one. And I've kind of filled it out. You have to say you agree with whatever they ask in that little box above the do you agree. And then you can enter your call sign in capital letters. That's important. It has to be in all caps. Put your name, your email, and a password, although I don't think the password is really necessary because of the way they do that. So once you do this, you'll wait a while, and basically you'll get an email from Ed saying that your registration is complete. So this takes all the guesswork out of it. By the way, you can get a hold of Ed if you have any problems. His call sign is WA8JMW. And his email address is his call sign @arrl.net. Okay, let me show you a few radios. I'll be doing the videos on this radio, but all ICOM radios operate essentially the same. The difference between this one and the reason that I used it in the videos is because it has a touchscreen, and it was very easy for me to show you how to do this. And I will defer this to Jerry because Jerry has an ID 4100A, and Jerry was able to do it even though his radio doesn't have the touchscreen. Correct, Jerry?
That's correct. Yep. It's just very easy to follow menu instructions.
This radio has a touchscreen interface, which I really like. And you can see some of the interesting features about this. You can end up purchasing this radio for about $399.95, although around Christmas time, you can get them cheaper than that. And I've seen them for $369.95. It's a great radio. It has a detachable control head, so you can go mobile with it. It has a built-in GPS, and you can put a optional Bluetooth module in like my radio has, which I really like, by the way. I have 2 of these. That's how much I like the radio. Okay, let's see. We'll go to the next radio. Okay. Okay, why are we not going? There's Jerry's ID 4100. That's a great radio. It doesn't have a touchscreen, but it has all the features that the ID 5100 has. It's got the built-in GPS. It has a lot of DR memories, and I'll talk about DR memories in a minute. That's really good. You can put an optional Bluetooth module in there, and all of these D-Star radios have the capability for accepting a micro SD card. Here's an IC 7100. This is a UHF VHF D-Star radio, but it's also HF. And with this radio, you can actually operate HF D-Star. It's a great radio. It's the one that I normally use. I like it. It's very simple. It has a touchscreen interface. And because it's an HF radio, it has more capabilities, and therefore the price is $859.95, which is not a bad price for this particular radio.
Okay, Bob,
Yes, Jerry?
these, the first two models that you showed, they also operate on analog modes like FM?
They do. As a
Okay.
matter of fact, and I'm going to show you something really neat when we get to the video, because when you get this radio, you won't have to do any programming to the radio. And I'll show you how to fix it so that it also has a bunch of FM repeaters that you can find without having a repeater directory.
Yeah, it's a neat feature, I know.
It is a great feature. So this radio, I've got one of these. It's an ID51A. Mine is not a +2. The +2 has some added capabilities because it has terminal and access point modes to where you can actually use this radio, connect it to a PC, and be able to transmit without having to go through a repeater. And the 4100 also has the terminal and access modes also. It has the capability for accepting a micro SD card. Unfortunately, it's discontinued. If you can find one of these radios, it is a great radio. Let's see, this is an ID52. This one is replacing the ID51. Don't know a lot about this radio because ICOM still hasn't come out with it, so I don't know what the current price is. But it has everything that most of the other radios have, including a color display, which is really a nice feature. I don't think it's touchscreen, but I don't know that for a fact. And so it does have built-in Bluetooth. Bluetooth is included automatically.
Bob, just a note on that 52. I don't know how many people are aware that the ADDA chip factory for the ham radio was burnt to the ground in Japan, and Kenwood has ceased production of the 74, and ICOM has temporarily suspended any delivery on the 52.
Okay.
So no more AD chips to build radios is what's happening.
Well, and that's not the only thing. I think the COVID is having some impact on being able to get parts also. So there's no telling when that radio is going to come out. This is ICOM's newest radio that's on the market. It's an IC705, which is a QRP radio, and it is UHF, VHF, and HF. All of those incorporate D-Star. It's 10 watts out if you use a power supply, 5 watts out if you use a battery. But it's a great radio. I love this radio. It's very small. It's not too light. It weighs a lot, but it's very small and you can backpack it. If you want to do summits on the air, this is a great radio to do that with. And this radio costs $1299.95. I think that's a good price for this radio. Let me talk about the big four, okay? If you get nothing out of this presentation, this is probably one of the most important things that you can learn. There are 4 things that go into the call sign register, okay? And the call sign register really determines how you navigate through the D-Star universe. And the 4 things are, number 1, which is your call sign. You put that in the radio one time and that's all you have to do. You'll never have to change that. And it'll accept up to, I think, 4 or 5 call signs. For example, if you have somebody in your house that also uses the radio, you can incorporate their call sign also. The UR is your call is is who you're calling. It's the station, the repeater module, or the reflector that you're calling. And when I show you how to operate the radio in the video, this stuff will all kind of make sense. Repeater 1 is the local repeater that you're working through. I normally work through K5URR, which is over at the hub off of Gibson. And I usually work off of the B module. And remember, the B module is the UHF module. The C module is the VHF module, or the VHF module. And then repeater 2 is the same call sign, but with a G. And 95% or more of the time, you're going to have K5URR with 2 spaces and a G. Okay. 3 things will typically not change when you're operating the radio. That's my repeat 1 and repeat 2. The only thing that's going to change for the most part is UR, and we'll see that when we look at the videos. So the format for these are, it's 8 characters for anything that goes in the call sign register. The call signs are left justified, and whatever else you put in there has to be filled out to 8 characters. Okay, so in repeat 1 and repeat 2, the module is always in the 8th position. It's either the module A, B, or G for the gateway, and typically it's always going to be G for repeater 2. Okay, so some examples would be if you have a 6-character call sign, you'd have 6 characters, 1 space, and then the module, which is B. K5URR is 5 characters. It has 2 spaces with a G or a B or a C. Okay, and a 4-character call sign would have 3 spaces with the module. Okay, so here's some examples. This is a basic QSO. We're using K5URR, the B module, to just do a local conversation. So repeat 1 would be K5URRB. Repeat 2 would be K5URRG. My call sign's N5JH, and you would put CQ, CQ, CQ. I got to mention that CQ, CQ, CQ really confused me, okay? Because it looks like I'm going to be calling CQ. But actually, CQ is basically you're talking through CQ, CQ, CQ. So it's only call that. Has nothing to do with you calling CQ. Okay? Yes.
Some question.
Okay.
If you're set up like you show here on the chart, repeat 1 and 2, are you choosing a particular repeater, or are you going out on both of those systems at the same time?
No, I'm going out on the repeater, which is repeat 1, and then I'm using the repeater's gateway, which is repeat 2.
Okay, okay.
And I select that. Whatever repeater you select will have the call sign there.
So if you were simplex or just going out on the local repeater, you wouldn't include the repeat 2 in that?
Actually, you wouldn't have repeat 2 and repeat 1. And I'll show you an example of that with actually when we do that on the radio. Good question, Jerry. Okay, if you're going to link to a reflector, let's say we're going to link to reflector 30 Charlie through K5URR. Repeat 1, repeat 2, and my will not change. The only thing that's going to change is UR, which is REF030, C, which is the C module of that reflector, and then L, which is the linking command. Okay, that's 8 characters, and that's basically how you link. When you do this, you're going to key the microphone, and that will cause the repeater to be linked to the reflector. And then as soon as you do that, you have to go back to a CQ, CQ, CQ. And I'll show you that on the radio when we do that. Linking to the repeater is pretty much the same, except instead of the reflector, what we're doing is we're putting the repeater that we want to link to, and it's we're linking to the VHF module of W7VOI, the VHF part of it. And then as soon as you key the microphone and link, then you have to go back to CQ, CQ, CQ. And then unlinking is probably the command you're going to be using the most, because anytime that you link to anything, whether it's a repeater or a reflector, you have to unlink before you link. Okay. And if you look at this, it is the only thing that changes here again is the UR field. And it's 7 spaces with the U and the A space. So when you key the microphone, you're going to unlink the whatever you're linked to, and you'll hear something say remote system linked, and then you change back to CQ, CQ, CQ. This will all make sense when I do this in the videos. Here is an example of what's in the DR memories. These are some of the DV repeaters, the digital voice repeaters, and I want you to notice a few things about this. By the way, these are already in the radio. So you don't have to worry about setting those up. You select the repeater that you're going to use, and then it automatically puts in whatever module you're going to be using and the G for the gateway. So that's already there. And the other thing that's interesting to notice is that the longitude and latitude is also in the DR memory. And that's important when you go looking for the nearest repeater. And I'm going to show you an example of that. Okay, here's the first video. This is finding the nearest repeater, one of the neatest things about this radio, I think. So let me see if I can play this. I'm going to be demonstrating. By the way, the video will talk for itself. If you have a question, let me know and I'll stop the video. I'm going to be demonstrating this video with an ICOM ID 5100 D-Star mobile radio. It's a 2-channel radio, and as you can see, there are 2 channels that are being displayed. There is the Caravan VHF analog repeater that's on the left-hand side and is the main channel. The channel on the right is a simplex channel that we're monitoring, and I can switch between those. If you see the dark main on the top left, I can switch that over to the simplex channel by hitting the sub button right here. And when I do, it becomes the main, and the Caravan VHF becomes the sub channel. What we're going to do is demonstrate a feature of these. By the way, you can hear both of those, even though you can only talk through the main channel. You can hear conversations on the sub channel and the main channel. Whoops. Sorry about that. Give me a second. Probably shouldn't stop these in the middle. I'm going to be demonstrating the hand side.
Bob, I have a question.
The channel on the right. Okay. Simplex channel that we're. Go ahead.
You said you can hear both channels. When you're listening on one, the other side doesn't mute?
No, but you can turn it off if you want.
Okay.
And there's independent volume controls, Terry. So on the top of the radio, on the left and right, there is a volume control. So if the sub channel bothers you, just turn the volume down.
Okay.
That's the low tech way.
Yeah, I gotcha. Because on the 8800, it mutes. You can just barely hear it, so you know it's active, but it mutes automatically.
I don't think this would mute, to be honest with you. Okay, let me catch up with this. Between main on the top comes the main. There we go. And the Caravan VHF becomes a sub channel. What we're going to do is demonstrate a feature of D-Star that's really a nice feature. And we're going to do this by putting the radio into the DR mode, which is a digital repeater mode. There's a number of different ways that you can do this, but using the DR mode is probably going to be the simplest. And once you get familiar with the radio, it's going to be the only one that you're going to be using. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch to the DR mode. And when we do that, the screen changes and there is a to box and a from box. The from box shows the repeater in Los Alamos, which was the last repeater that I was working. That from is the repeater that you're going to be working through. The to box on the top, I'll explain that to you later in subsequent videos. But what we're going to do is we are going to find the nearest repeater to us. This is a good feature. You don't need a repeater directory because basically you have a repeater directory built into the radio. So what we're going to do is we are going to tap on the from box. Then we get the from select with 3 different menu items. The middle one is the nearest repeater. So we'll tap that. And we want the nearest repeater that's digital voice. We can also find the nearest repeater that's FM if the radio memories have FM repeaters built into it. So we're going to switch to the DV mode, the nearest repeater. It's searching. And there we go. Basically, this shows us the nearest repeaters to us from the closest to the farthest as you go down the screen. The nearest repeater to us is K5URR. the D side, which is the UHF side. It's 6.1 miles from us and approximately southwest of here. So we're going to go ahead and select that. And there you go. Now, the reason that this can happen is the radio has a built-in GPS. So the radio knows where it is. All the D-Star repeaters are geocoded, which means they have their longitude and latitude, which you saw. The radio can perform a simple algorithm and calculate the distance between where it is and the nearest repeater, and also give you the direction. And again, this is a nice feature. You don't need a repeater handbook. Wherever you travel, you can basically find the nearest repeater to you. Okay. We are at dstarinfo.com, and this particular website is something that if you do anything at all with D-Star Radio, this is a place that you can go to find a lot of information, including what we're going to be doing next, which is downloading a refreshed version of the DR memories. So I'm going to hit the download, come down here to repeater list downloads for DR. Let me mention one thing. The radios have the DR memories filled when you get it. But that list is probably an old list and it may not be set up quite the way that you want it. So what I'm going to show you is how you can refresh the DR memories in the radio. Again, the radios come with the DR memories filled.
And it's very important to make sure that you format your SD card in the radio.
Yes, see the red, thank you, Jerry. That's a good thing to know, because if you format the SD card from the radio in your computer, it doesn't set up the directory structure like you want it to be. It has to be set up in a certain way so that it works in concert with the radio. Thank you, Jerry. Let me see if I can do this without messing up. Tap that, and we're going to go down to this section right here. First thing we're going to do is we're going to enter our location, and we can do that by zip code. 87123 is my current zip code. And if I hit the look up location, it says we found the following location, Albuquerque, New Mexico. So now we're going to go ahead and select the radio. The radio that I'm using is an ID51A, not the E, because it's a European version, and a version 1.20. So I'll select that, and it fills in some information for us here. The thing that we're really interested in is this repeater list length, and it says that we have 1,500 DR memory locations. There's a couple of boxes here that we can change. We're going to actually add 20 empty repeater slots in case I want to add things later on. And we're going to change the percentage to 50% FM. That means that we'll have 50% FM repeaters and 50% DR repeaters. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and download that file. And we're going to save that directly into the SD card that I've already put into the computer for the radio. So if I hit this one right here and go to the ID 5100, and this is why formatting this card is important, because it actually sets up the correct directory structure. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the CSV directory, the repeater list, and that is where we're going to save that file. And it saved the file. So now what we're going to do is we're going to get out of here. We are going to go to the SD card, and we're going to go ahead and eject that. And that takes care of this part of what we're doing. I have replaced the SD card into the radio, and I'm ready to refresh the DR memories. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to go to the menu. We're going to go down to the SD card. We're going to do import export. We're going to do import repeater list. There's our file that we saved when we downloaded it from dstarinfo.com. We'll press that. We'll keep settings in the repeater list, say yes to that. We're going to import the file. And there we go. We're off and running. As soon as that gets done importing, we'll see what it says next. Completed. So we have to reboot the ID 5100. To do that, we're going to turn the radio off. And we're going to turn the radio back on. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go to the DR mode. We're going to see if we have our repeater list, and there it is. So we're going to go back. Now we're going to see if we can find the nearest repeater, the DV repeater. And there's K5URRB. So we'll do that. And we're, by the way, that's a little bit of a poor example because the nearest repeater was the same one that we found before we refreshed the DR memories. Good shape. And if we're going to transmit, we'll go back to the reflector and use reflector. So now we're good to go. And by the way, that repeater is typically always linked to reflector 55 alpha. So if you go back to the reflector, then you're set up to do whatever you need to do to be able to talk to anybody. But let me, here's a neat thing here. The nearest FM repeater, so let's give that a try. So we'll go here, tap that again. We'll go to near repeater. And this time we're going to go to FM repeaters. And there is a list of the local FM repeaters here. So if we go down a couple of spaces here, I like to hang out on W5CSY. So if I tap that, it'll put that in the front. There's nothing in the two, and I can transmit on FM, and we're good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the nearest DV repeater so that we can get back to where we were. And there we go. We are good to go. Oh, let's see. By the way, we're at dstarinfo.com. We start this particular. A couple things to note here. When it refreshes the FM repeaters, it takes care of the offset. It takes care of the PL tone and the frequency. So you don't have to do any of those things. So basically what you do is you have a repeater directory built into the radio. And if you're going to be traveling around, you don't have to take a repeater directory with you. You should have everything that you need on the radio. So I consider that one of the great features of the radio.
Hey, Bob.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah, let me repeat that your directions are so clear and the menuing is so consistent among the ICOM radios that I was able to make the translation easily to my 4100, which has no touchscreen, but it does have, you know, buttons that you push that get you into those menu items. It's really, this is the best, most thorough education I've gotten. And I really appreciate having the opportunity to review those videos. Thanks.
Thank you, Jerry, and thanks for reviewing those for me. I'll send you a check at the end of the presentation. My best salesman.
What is the URL of that page?
dstarinfo, one word.com, and it's also on a view graph in the back. I have that in the list of the resources. Let's see, before we get going. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you know if they police the directory? Because here in the local area, about 3 of the local repeaters have not been on the air in a long time, although they still show. And if you look at traffic, there's no traffic showing on any of the online resources. So apparently there's nobody who checks to make sure they're still active. Is that correct?
I would say that that's probably correct. And when you think about that, that's a monumental task because somebody would have to know all the repeaters in the country to be able to figure that out. So, you know, I don't know. They typically update this list periodically, and I don't know how they do the policing. But because of what you said, my guess is they don't do that.
Okay,
fair statement?
Yeah, it would actually be very easy because they can see all the traffic that leaves the repeater onto the internet, and they log that.
Well, maybe on D-Star, but not on FM.
That's correct. D-Star, we're talking.
I got to remember that they're 2 different things. But you know, the repeater directory in a book could have the same problem.
Indeed. Thanks a lot.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's see, another question?
Just a quick comment that regarding I'm a repeater owner, and if you make a change to the repeater, generally it's up to the repeater owner to inform um, like ARRL or Sci-Fi or QTH, any of the listings that your repeater has changed or it's off the air for good or whatever. You're right. There's so many that it's impossible for anybody to keep tabs on all of them. It's up to the repeater owner to supply that information, I think, in general. And if they don't do it, then.
That's a good point, Jerry. Let's see, before I go on, you remember that I put 20 empty spaces when I did refreshing. And I did that for a reason. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to set up a simplex channel in DR memory and then actually use that simplex channel. And we're going to put a specific frequency in for 41.00 megahertz. That happens to be the frequency of the D-Star simplex net that we run on Wednesday. So I did that for a reason, so you could see that, in case you wanted to put that in your radio. Okay, let me start this. We're going to show you another feature of this radio that I think is pretty nice. Right. By the way, I did these videos because I've tried to work with the radio live when I did the presentation, and something always happens. In this way, I have a chance to be able to do the videos so that you can come back and look at those. So there were two reasons. One, I could do these and get them perfect. And the other reason is because they're going to be recorded and you'll be able to go back and see them. So that's the method to my madness. Now we have a 2-channel display on the screen, and that's a lot of information. And the thing that we're really interested in is on the right-hand side of the screen. So we're going to set this to a 1-channel display by holding the main and holding it down for a second. Now there's only 1 channel displayed, and it's only the things that we really have an interest in. What we're going to do now is we are going to learn how to put a simplex channel into the DR memories. And after we do that, then we're going to actually see how to use that to make a call. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to be out of the DR mode. And what we're going to do now is we're going to press the menu. We're going to go to the DV memory, the repeater list, and we have some empty repeater groups. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a new repeater group. 01 doesn't have anything in it, so we'll go with that one. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to push the quick button, and we're going to edit the name. And what we're going to do is we're going to call this simplex. By the way, watch carefully. I type very fast. Do you see that? So now we have a repeater group that's called simplex. And what we're going to do to this is we're actually going to add the simplex channel to this repeater group. So we're going to press on that. It's blank. And the one thing that we can do here is we can add a frequency. So what we're going to do is do that, and we need to make sure that we are not in DV repeater, but we're in DV simplex. The name for this particular channel, we'll call this DV simplex. Not a very imaginative name, by the way. So here we go. I type fast. Okay, then we're going to add the frequency. First of all, this use from, we want that to say yes. The frequency is going to be 441, 441.000. We're going to enter that. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and write that to memory. And there we go. We have a simplex channel in group 1, which is simplex. So we're going to go back. Now we're going to go ahead and use that particular channel. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to press DR to get back into DR mode. And it's where we left it from the last time. So we're going to go to the from, And rather than go to near repeater, we're going to go to the repeater list. If we go up to the top, we see that there is a simplex channel. And what we're Simplex gonna group, do is we're not going to channel. select this. And in order to really make a simplex call, the next thing that we have to do is do a local CQ. So, by the way, this is one of the few times that you will ever use local CQ. There's just not a reason for doing that unless you're going to be doing simplex. We're going to do that. When we take a look at the call sign register, this is what we're going to see. There's no repeaters involved in here. It's, yeah, you remember I said that if you do a local simplex, there wouldn't be anything in RPT1 or R1 and R2. The only thing you'll see is my call and CQ, CQ, CQ. And it says use repeater, but it's actually a local CQ.
Hey, Bob,
Yes.
can you just explain that the difference between the local CQ and the repeater CQ one more time? Because I found that very confusing when I first started.
Yeah, let me explain that. The local CQ basically only allows you to operate simplex or go through the local repeater. And that happens because R2 will always be blank if you're using a local local CQ. Okay. If you're not using a local CQ, there'll be a call sign in there, K5URR, excuse me, with a couple of spaces and a G at the end. But if you use a local CQ, you're not going out through the gateway. Okay. If you don't use a local CQ, if you use CQ, 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 use repeater, or CQ, 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 use reflector, which is the same thing, then you'll see something in R2 and it'll be the call sign of the repeater plus the G, which means that now you're going to go out the gateway. Does that make sense, Mark?
Sorry, I had to unmute. Yeah, for a new person, it can be kind of strange. So I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, when I first got on D-Star, I talked to Mark a lot and we used to unlink from the reflector so that we could just go through the repeater. Later on, you're going to find that if you D-Star for any length of time, what you're going to end up doing is getting a hotspot. And a hotspot just allows you to connect to the internet on one side and connect to a local radio on the other side so that you can go through the hotspot, connect to any reflector in the world without actually having to go through a repeater. I don't cover hotspots in this presentation because it would have been too long. But maybe on part 2, I can talk about hotspots.
Bob?
Yes.
I was going to say, for a lot of people, it does get confusing in that area, but the main important thing, just remember this. If you want to be heard across the reflector, you just like what you said, you want to use CQ, CQ, CQ. If you want to use just talk locally to the repeater there, you would just say change to local repeater. So that way, none of your traffic goes out across the reflector. If I'm coming in on a hotspot, though, it's a little different for me because I can attach to any one of those repeaters of the W5MPZ or K5URR. But because I'm coming across the internet, I still have to connect like I'm connecting to a reflector. So you may be on local CQ, but you won't hear their traffic, but you'll hear my traffic. So that's where the confusion stems a lot from, is
right.
People understanding that.
The bottom line is if you're going to be doing a local contact through the repeater, there's not going to be anything in R2. It's going to be blank. Okay. And that's why when we look at the CS register, it's always good because it basically can tell you if your radio is set up correctly. All right, let me continue on. It's me talking directly on a simplex channel. Okay, and we're done with that. You can actually go in and change those 20 empty slots to put anything in there. So for example, if you're going to be using a hotspot, you can actually set up one of those memory locations to accommodate your the radio for your hotspot. I tried not to give you a lot of technical detail because I didn't want to confuse you with too many things. So I wanted to try to keep this as simple as I could. Okay, in the next video, we're going to do something that's really nice. We'll do a couple things. We'll do repeater information where we can actually have the repeater tell us some things about itself. And then we can do an echo test, which tests the quality from your radio to the repeater and back again. And when you watch the video, you'll see how that's done. Now that we found the nearest repeater to us, K5URR, the UHF side, we'd like to find out some information about that repeater. We can do that by hitting the 2 box, tapping that, going down to the reflector, going to the next set of menus, and hitting the repeater information. Now, if you take a look at what's in the 2 box, you'll see that there is just an I and it says repeater information. One of the things that would be good to do before we do this is to take a look at the call sign register. And if you take a look at this, you'll see that my call sign is N5JH. The repeater that we're using is K5URR on the B side. And repeater 2 is K5URR with a G for the gateway. And then UR is just an I, which is in the 8th position of that command. So now what we're going to do is we're going to key the repeater and send that command to the repeater. And when I do, you'll see that there's going to be some information that scrolls across the bottom of the screen that tells you about the repeater. Here goes. Remote system link. If we tap this little button right there, we'll get some information, and it says that on the bottom message that reflector 55 alpha is linked. By the way, if you look at the distance, it says 1,261 miles. That is, of course, nothing local, or it wouldn't be that far away. It's actually the distance between here and Georgia. And the call sign that you see up there, AA4RC, is a gentleman by the name of Robin Cutshaw. And Robin Cutshaw was the one that developed all the linking for D-Star. So I don't know, maybe this is just a tribute to him, but we are 1,261 miles away from Robin Cutshaw. Just in case you wanted to know why that said that, that distance.
Hey, Bob, question.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is Greg, AF5SP. Why does the question mark show up after RPT? What does that mean?
You know, I'm going to have to, you kind of got me on a gotcha here. There's 2 things that show up with question marks. UR question mark and RPT with a question mark. And I hope somebody else that's more knowledgeable can tell you what those are, because they do have meaning. Elmer, do you know what those are?
Hang on, I'm being stupid with my computer today.
Okay.
Sometimes when a question mark comes up at the repeaters, you know, and when you're transmitting digital information on that stream, there's usually a header text in there that describes location, where it's at. Sometimes they don't fill those fields in. That could be one reason. Other times a user may transmit and he hasn't put anything in the text message field. So it says, I don't know where you're at. So there it comes across. But actually, I think that's mainly what causes that. I'm not 100% sure of that, but you're right. I have to investigate that too. Most of the time, I usually don't pay a whole lot of attention. I just want to see who the call sign is.
Greg, I'm going to look that up and I'll send everybody an email.
Okay, thanks, Bob.
That got this link. And if David can help me, I think that would be good. But RPT question mark and UR question mark, and we'll get you an answer to that. I don't usually look at those because when I operate the radio, everything makes sense to me other than what those mean. But that's a good question, Greg. Thank you for catching me with my pants down. Okay, continuing on. You know, I'm not an expert in everything, that's for sure. Let me find out where, okay, here we go. There's still some information scrolling across the bottom of the screen. And there's a message that says reflector 55 alpha is linked, which is exactly what we thought it would be. Okay, now the important thing here is that you can't leave the 2 box with that command, because if you do, every time that you key the microphone, you're going to send that command to the repeater. So we're going to have to get out of that. And we do that by hitting the 2 box again going back to the reflector and going to the next menu and then use reflector. Once we do that, we're ready to transmit and we're good to go. Now that we've done that, there's one other useful thing that we can do, and that is to do an echo test. The echo test gives us information about the signal quality because it tests our signal going from the radio to the repeater and back again. So if I key the repeater in an echo test, what I say into the microphone is going to come back as an echo. So to do that, we hit the 2 box again. We go to the reflector. We go to the echo test. Now, if I key this and talk, it'll echo that back and we'll see if our signal is good going from the radio to the repeater and then back to the radio. This is N5JH with an echo test. This is N5JH with an echo test. Okay, so that worked out well and our signal looks like it's pretty good. So the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to make sure that we don't leave it in echo test, because if we do, every time we key the microphone, it's going to continue to do the echo test. And that may get on somebody's nerves. So what we need to do is get out of that by hitting this, the 2 box, going to reflector, and then use reflector. Now we are ready to transmit. Okay, I have 2 more. I think there's 2 more videos and then just a short section after that. Now that we found it here. 3 more videos, sorry. One of the things that you'll find is that the repeaters that are local default to reflector 55 alpha. 55 alpha is basically a New Mexico reflector. And typically, what happens is if you want to link to another repeater somewhere else, you need to unlink, okay? Anytime you want to relink to someplace or link to someplace, you need to unlink. So what we're going to do is we're going to find out how to unlink. Right now, this repeater is connected to, or it's linked to, I should say, reflector 55 alpha. So in order to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to hit the 2 button, or the 2 box as usual, go to the reflector, and we're going to come down to the unlink menu selection here. And if I key this, it's going to unlink the reflector. So here goes. Remote system unlinked. Okay, so now if we take a look at the call sign register and see what's in there, we'll see that the only thing that's changed is the UR field. And basically that has a U in the 8th position, and that is to unlink the reflector. So that's all we need to do to be able to do that. Now, recall that anytime you send a command, that says unlink reflector next to the U, but it could be a reflector, repeater, it doesn't matter. If I would have been king of putting together what the menu item said, I would have just said unlink. So I hope nobody's confused over that. To a repeater, you need to make sure that you are in the CQ domain. So basically what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to hit the 2 box again, basically. And we're going to have to go to reflector and then use reflector. And that gets us back to use reflector, CQ, and we're ready to transmit. Okay, next one is we're actually going to link the last 2 videos. We're going to link to a reflector, and then we're going to link to another repeater. One of the things that you'll in the last video, we showed how to unlink. You should always unlink if you're going to be linking to a repeater or a reflector. In this video, we're going to link to a reflector. For our purpose here, we're going to link to reflector 55B. Reflector 55B is New Mexico Aries, Skywarn, public service and general use. It's always a good practice to identify and state your intentions, such as this is N5JH, activating link to reflector 55B. To start, we'll tap on the 2 box. By the way, not very many people do that, but it is probably a good operating practice. Then tap on the reflector menu item. Then tap on link to reflector. That takes us to a menu with 3 menu items. The second and third items are entries that were made earlier with direct input. We're going to tap on the direct input. In the darkened box, we need to change to 55. We can do that in one of 2 ways. We can either use the plus or minus buttons, or we can use this knob over here on the bottom left, which we'll do because I think it's much faster. So we'll go to 55. And then we're going to tap on the letter box. And we will change that to a B. An important thing to note is that after doing this and executing the link command, reflector 55B will be entered into this list. So the next time we'd like to link to reflector 55B, you won't have to use direct input because it'll already be in the list. Now we'll tap on the set button. We see the 2 box says link to reflector and has reflector 055BL right below it. We'll tap on the call sign button. And the only thing that's changed is the top, which is the UR, and it has REF055BL. That's 8 characters, and it's important because the L is in the 8th character where it should be. Anytime you execute a command, the command has to be the 8th letter. The 3 things on the bottom are likely not going to change. So we'll tap on the return button. Now we'll key the microphone and listen to what comes back. That's an indication that the link command was successful. Now always remember that anytime you execute a command, you need to go back to CQ, use reflector. Otherwise, we'll continue to send that linking command every time we key the microphone. And we don't want to do that. So we're going to hit the link to reflector. We're going to hit reflector and go back to use reflector. And now we are ready to talk. When finished with the reflector, we should unlink and relink back to reflector 55 alpha, which is the default reflector for this repeater. So we'll do that now.
Hey, question, Bob.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is Greg, AF5SP. What happens if you don't unlink your station to the reflector?
Well, there's a couple things that can happen. One is it's going to stay linked so that everybody that's connected to that reflector is going to continue to hear conversations from the repeater. And then if there isn't a lot of, if the radio goes silent for a while, the gateway has software in it that will automatically unlink after a certain time of no activity. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
That's a good question. And by the way, if you don't unlink, you're not going to get very many friends.
That was, yeah, kind of my next comment. It probably wouldn't go over very well.
Exactly. You got it. Good question, Greg.
Bob, I sent you the response to that question on the private message, so you can read it out when you get a chance.
Okay. And everybody can, on private, okay, I got you. Thanks, Elmer. Let me finish this. We're going to unlink and relink. We'll send the unlink command. Is anybody comfortable if we proceed without doing that? Because it's just a regurgitation of what we've already done. Okay, we're going to go to the next video, which is actually linking to another repeater. You can link to any repeater in the world by doing this, and it's very easy to do. It's like linking a reflector. This is the last video. This is the last video that we're going to show. I have one more, but since we're going so long, I can't show that one. Let me go ahead and start this.
This short video will demonstrate how to link to a remote repeater. The repeater we are interested in is NM5WR in Los Alamos. Even though this repeater is fairly close to us, we can link to any D-Star repeater anywhere in the world. The NM5WR repeater only has a B module, and we need to specify this module in the linking command. Before linking, it's a good idea to state your intention, something like this. This is N5JH activating link to NM5WR module B. To start the linking, first tap on the 2 box. That takes us to the 2 select screen. To accomplish the linking, we're going to use the direct input UR menu item. Tapping this takes us to the direct input UR screen. There is a call sign in there, and we're going to delete that by tapping this clear a number of times. Now we enter the following command. NM5WR. That's 5 spaces. We need to put another space in here to make this be filled out to 8 spaces. So this is the 6th character. The next one is B for the B module of that repeater. And the last letter we put in is L for linking. Normally we would put the module letter in the 8th position, just like repeater 1 and repeater 2. However, since we are linking, the letter L needs to go into the 8th position. After entering this into direct input UR, tap on the Int button, and what we entered will be placed in the 2 box. Check the call sign register to see what is there. And NM5WR space BL is in the UR like we expect it to be. As we always do to link, key the microphone for about a second to transmit the command. If the command succeeds, the repeater will play a recording saying, "Remote system linked." And there we go. After linking, remember to change the 2 back to CQ use reflector. If you don't do that, you will continue to send the linking command every time you key the microphone. I'll key the microphone again and we'll see what we hear. Link currently established. And that tells us that we've already sent the link command. We're getting this.
And if you don't change that, it'll continue to send that. And again, you won't get very many friends that way. So if you're looking to keep your friends, don't do that.
It's a good way to lose friends. So now we're going to go and change back to CQ use reflector. And this is like we normally do. We hit the reflector. Didn't mean to do. We hit the reflector and then use reflector, and that gets us back to CQ use reflector. Now we can talk to the good folks in Los Alamos. Remember to unlink the repeater when you're finished. If you don't do this, the users of NM5WR will continue to hear everyone using K5URR. So we're going to go ahead and unlink like we normally do. We'll tap the.
So I'll go ahead and stop that because we've already seen unlinking and relinking. But basically, the bottom line is if you link to another repeater, make sure that you unlink when you're done. Otherwise, people will continue to hear everything on our local repeater, on that remote repeater, and that's not a good thing.
Question for clarification, Bob.
Okay, go ahead, David.
Back in San Diego County, there's a repeater there called Lions Peak, and it is not a D-Star repeater. It's just a regular standalone repeater. Are you saying I can link to that repeater?
No, you can only link to a D-Star repeater. Thank you for the clarification. Yeah, you can't link to any repeater. It has to be a D-Star repeater.
Okay, that's why I wanted the clarification. Thank you.
Okay, good question. There's 3 local repeaters. One is W5MPZ, that's up on the crest. That's operated by Sandia Labs. It has a C module, and I understand that they just put an A module in for 1.2 gigahertz. Okay, so that's been done. There's the URL to their website, and if you want to register through that repeater, that's the URL for that registration link. The other repeater is K5URR. That repeater is located at the hub just off Gibson, just a little bit west of San Mateo. And that's operated by the Upper Rio FM Society. And it has a UHF and a VHF module. By the way, those modules are entirely separate. So you can have individual conversations that are different going on each one of those. And if you wanted to, you could actually link those together, just like you could by linking a repeater. There's the website and the registration URL, which I gave to you back on the slide that talked about registration. The last one.
So there's no gateway there?
There is a gateway. There's a gateway on every one of these repeaters. I don't know of any D-Star repeater that doesn't have a gateway. I may be wrong, but all the ones that I've ever seen have a gateway. The last repeater is W5URD. That's located up on Copia Peak, which is south of Albuquerque. It's also operated by the Upper Rio. Incidentally, Ed James takes care of all 3 of these repeaters, and plus about 4 or 5 other ones around the state. He's a busy guy. It only has a B module, which is UHF, and there's the URLs for the website and for registration. Let me talk about a little bit of resources. I'm not going to read all these, but basically, this view graph is a good view graph. It has the reference to dstar.info.com, which is hands down the best resource for D-Star. Here's a book called The Nifty Easy Guide to D-Star Operation by Bernie Lafreniere. That's a good book. It's a little data, but it still has really good information in it. And then we've got the D+ dashboards that you can look at. If you want to know the status of the repeater, all you have to do is put in one of these 2 URLs, and I'll show you what you'll see. Here's the D+ dashboard for K5URR, and doesn't show a lot of activity, but it does show that module B is linked to reflector 55 alpha. And you can see the remote users and also the last people that were heard on the repeater. And if you look at the reflector, this reflector, these shots were taken during the El Paso D-Star net, so there's a lot of activity. And you can see, go ahead.
Hey, Bob?
Yeah.
I just wanted to make a comment about the dashboard. I have that bookmarked on the browser, and it's very helpful just to see if the repeater is up and running or if the gateway is working or if it's already linked. So that's something to keep in mind to use as you're going through.
It's a super resource. And if you see up there on the top where it says REF 55, it's in blue. You can change that reflector number to any number and still get the dashboard for that particular reflector. And if I go back to the repeater, you can change that to any repeater call sign, and you'll be able to get the dashboard for that particular repeater. So anyway, there's a bunch of articles, and there's a ton of videos on YouTube. I'm almost done, David. Sorry, I'm taking long. Let's see, more D-Star resources. There are 3 D-Star nets that are local. There's the El Paso D-Star net, Monday night, 7 p.m. You can go through either the repeater or reflector 55 alpha. The New Mexico D-Star net is on Thursday evening it's actually 8 o'clock. That's a mistake. And you can access again through K5URR or reflector 55 alpha. And there's also a New Mexico D-Star email reflector that has a lot of details. That's a really good source of information. Brian Milashowski, N5ZGT, sent me an email right before I started this presentation and gave me that information.
Hey, Bob.
Yes, sir.
Hey, this is Brian, N5ZGT. Can you go back 1 slide, please?
I can.
Thanks. Just a quick correction. So generally certainly the New Mexico D-Star net, but I also believe the El Paso D-Star net, you can access that net through all of the New Mexico D-Star repeaters as well as the reflector. You can either manually link, the repeater to that net, but more often than not, the repeater owners around the state, including El Paso, have been coordinating with one another, and they actually have their systems set up to automatically link together for these nets. So generally, you don't have to manually link your repeater to access the net, but definitely the New Mexico D-Star net, and I believe the El Paso D-Star net as well. Any repeater in New Mexico, and there's repeaters in Farmington, on Pajarito Mountain, on San Antonio Mountain now, Sandia Crest, down in Socorro, down in Las Cruces, in El Paso, I think in Roswell. There's repeaters everywhere in New Mexico, D-Star repeaters, that is. They all generally will link automatically for those nets. So all you need to do is tune into your local D-Star repeater, and you're a participant of that net.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. And by the way, when they do one of these nets, if you look at the link gateways that are basically linked to module A, there's a whole bunch of repeaters that are linked for that net. And typically, if you look at the dashboard for Reflector 55, anytime that they're not doing a net, you'll see a whole lot less information. Thanks for the clarification. You want to say anything about the email reflector, Brian?
Yeah, sure thing. So so Bob's presentation here is awfully helpful, very good resource. D-Star is one of those things where there's a little bit of a learning curve, like many things in amateur radio, and there's lots of resources to learn. Thank you, Bob, for doing this fine presentation. The New Mexico D-Star email reflector, not to be confused by a D-Star reflector like what we've been talking about. It's an email listserv, if you will. That is accessible at the link that you see on your screen. There's currently 160 D-Star users around New Mexico and outside of New Mexico that are on this email list. And the list exists for you to answer or ask questions, to answer questions, to talk about new experiments on D-Star that you're doing, coordinate, new repeaters, if you have a new repeater that shows up in your area, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a community of New Mexico D-Star users. Any amateur radio operator is free to subscribe to this email reflector. Go to that link, subscribe, and you'll be in the flow of information. It also includes announcements of upcoming D-Star nets every week and things like that, as well as reports from those nets. So it's a really, really good resource to maybe carry forward after this great presentation that Bob has made. And if I can make just two more comments, Bob. New Mexico's, about 80% of New Mexico's population is covered by D-Star repeater coverage. So if you think about where our population centrals are, there's D-Star repeaters around, and they're all linked or linkable to each other. So Bob, I'll send you a coverage map that I've made showing the propagation coverage of all the repeaters. It's got some, basic assumptions, but it's a at a glance kind of view of where the repeaters are in New Mexico and what their coverage is. And if you want to send that out to the audience here or incorporate it in your presentation, it might be pretty enlightening to see.
Yeah, very
Great
good.
job,
Thank
Bob.
you, Brian. Let's see, I think that's the end. My apologies for taking so long. If you got bored and fell asleep, I probably was watching you on the on your picture, and I apologize for that. And if we get somebody turned on with D-Star, I think that's great. I have one more video. It's on the end, and I just let me tell you something about it. Call sign routing is a function that's not used very often anymore. But what it is the D-Star system, mainly the trust server, keeps track of every repeater that you last transmitted on. So if you want to talk to a friend that you heard locally, like I did, and then you wanted to find him, you could actually find him through something called call sign routing. It's not used very often because the problem with call sign routing is you can actually call somebody directly and talk to them, but the issue is when you do that, you're not linking, you're connecting. And the problem is that when you do that, the people on the remote repeater where that person is can hear you, but you can't hear them. So you could be coming in on the middle of their conversation. So it's not used very often, but that capability still does exist. And this video explains that if we're going to put this up somewhere where people can look at the videos. Any other questions? And again, David, I apologize. I didn't know it was going to take quite this long.
That's beautiful. No problem whatsoever.
Can you answer those question mark questions?
Oh, yeah. Let me see. Let me find out. I think he sent me that on.
Why doesn't he just read it?
Yeah, that's a good point. Let's see, Elmer, if you're still there, give us the answer to the RPT question mark and the UR question mark.
Well, it actually has to do exactly what you were talking about, call sign routing. The repeater question marks is a standard response to normal transmission. In the early days of D-Star, ICOM assumed everyone would use call sign routing. So basically, and I'll sum it up, it's just basically saying, yes, we're connected. It's a standard response. We're ready to go. Okay, that's all it is. And it was
yeah, if I were going to use call sign routing, what I would do is if I could get a hold of the person, I would say, what repeater are you on? And then I would just go ahead and connect to the repeater. And that way you can hear all the conversations on the remote repeater.
Yeah. Instead, what Rob and all the other groups have decided to do when they're using the reflectors in US, they basically said, instead of using that, we're going to go ahead and put in CQ, CQ, CQ. So what it's basically saying is D-Star is waiting for that call sign response, but it says, we're going to go ahead and acknowledge it. That's probably why you see the question mark there. It's just saying, okay, we've connected. It's good. Let's roll. So it's in simplest terms. But up on the QuadNet, we actually use call sign routing for smart groups. So we can be attached to multiple smart groups without putting anything in our CQ field. So I can be listening on one smart group, listening to the main reflector that's on the QuadNet, and at the same time listening to the QChat, like another channel, like anything technical related to the QuadNet. So it's kind of a nice feature, but you're right. That's probably one of the biggest reasons they did not decide to use it here in the US, because imagine you're in a net on 30 Charlie or wherever the case you may be, and all of a sudden some kind comes booming, and hey, Bob, are you there? Well, how about dinner tonight? And everybody in the world can hear you.
Yeah, you can still use it. It's there. It works, but most people don't use it. And if you're going to use it, talk to the person and then link to the repeater after you talk to them. Any other questions?
Great presentation, Bob. Thank you.
Let me add one thing. You can save the configuration of your radio on that SD card. And I've given that configuration to a number of people. And all they have to do is import that. And then they have everything that my radio is programmed to. This way, I didn't cover programming because you can operate D-Star with any of the D-Star radios without actually having to do any programming with programming software. It's always good if you do that because it makes things easier, but you can get on the air right away with the steps that I've outlined in the presentation. I'm done, David.
Is this presentation going to be posted on the internet?
This presentation will be posted to the club's YouTube channel, which is Ham Sandwich Productions on YouTube. If you search for Ham Sandwich Productions, this will be there.